AEW Winter is coming. The second annual Winter is coming. Took place December 15th from the Curtis Caldwell Center in Garland, Texas. We're going to run down everything that took place on the show. But before we get to that, I do want to talk about some news that has been making headlines in the world of professional wrestling as it pertains to AEW. And I want to start with Kevin Owens having re-signed with WWE. This is something that's surprising, perhaps kind of disappointing to AEW fans. I think a lot of people had expected Owens to end up in AEW at some point, especially after several months ago, he had tweeted out the geographical coordinates to Mount Rushmore. And he deleted it shortly after. But it's like, okay, what the heck are these random numbers, Kevin Owens? People figured out they were the sort of geographical coordinates for Mount Rushmore. And Mount Rushmore was the name of a stable he was in PWG with Adam Cole and the Young Bucks. So a lot of people took that as a hint that Owens was AEW bound. We were going to see the return of Kevin Steen. But then news breaks earlier this week that Owens has signed a multi-year agreement with WWE. So some of the possible reasons about why Owens has re-signed with WWE was addressed on Wrestling Observer Radio by Dave Meltzer. And he noted that Owens got a good money deal, about $2 to $3 million per year for 3 years. And that's just something that AEW wasn't able to offer Owens. There are people in AEW making that and more. But I guess the feeling was that Owens would not be able to get the same type of deal from AEW. Now, one part that I thought was really interesting is that Owens was not able to get a no-cut clause in his contract. If you're not familiar with what that is, a no-cut clause would basically mean, hey, you can't be fired. Or if you are fired, WWE owes you what's remaining on your contract. And so this would prevent you from being one of the many people that WWE has been cutting recently. So sort of the complaint with there not being these no-cut clauses in wrestlers' contracts is, well, the wrestler is making a commitment to WWE, but WWE is not making a commitment to the wrestler. So you could, if WWE could, if they wanted to, sign these people up to multi-million-dollar deals, then wait for when it's a time where free agency isn't as lucrative in wrestling, cut the person, and then, maybe even sign them back at a lower rate. Or they could just cut them at a time when they know AEW wouldn't be able to pick them up for whatever reason. So they seem a little unfair. And it kind of seems like, why would you do, if you're a wrestler and you've got offers coming in from 2 different companies, could you not insist that one of them offer you a guaranteed deal? But I guess the idea here is Owens is going to be making $2 to $3 million per year. He probably figures, look, I'll just ride it out with WWE, making way more money than I would in AEW. And if I get fired, well, I just kind of hope that whatever deal I was going to get offered by AEW is still there when I get fired. So, but why not make this more lucrative amount of money now while I can? And just get paid as much as I can before I get cut, if I get cut. Because it's not as though WWE wasn't, look, WWE signed Bray Wyatt and they signed Braun Strowman to deals worth over $1 million per year. And then when it came time to cut budget, well, they knew they could cut a lot of budget by getting rid of some of their higher priced guys that they felt weren't worth the money anymore. And in the case with Braun Strowman, I think they thought that Braun Strowman's a few years past his peak, but we're still paying him his peak money. We've got this guy almost now who can be our giant. So maybe we don't have as much need for Braun Strowman, and so it doesn't make sense to continue paying him this amount of money. With Bray Wyatt, I think the idea was that Bray Wyatt was, well, this is what the reports say. I don't know how true this is. But with Bray Wyatt, I think the idea was that he was very protective of his character and was sort of refusing to do things, and also wasn't medically cleared a lot, although it's not really clear why that was the case. But if I was Bray Wyatt and I was in WWE after that Hell in the Cell match that everybody booed between him and Seth Rollins, I'd be pretty protective of my character too, considering some of the booking decisions were killing it in some way. But if you're Kevin Owens, you have to look at the landscape and go, big money deals in WWE get cut too. So maybe he got a bonus as well for signing that we don't know about. But it's definitely not a deal that he couldn't get released from if WWE decided for whatever reason that he wasn't worth the money later. That could happen to Owens, and I think he's just banking on the idea that even if it does, I'll have made all this money during the time that I was still employed there, and maybe that offer that I would have had from AEW will still be there after I'm let go. So that's Kevin Owens' free agency. There's some other free agency news that I think is worth mentioning here. And we're still talking about Kyle O'Reilly and Johnny Gargano, who are now both free agents after having spent the last 4-5 years. I think Gargano was in NXT since like 2015, something like that. Kyle O'Reilly and Johnny Gargano, two of like the pillars of NXT, are now gone from that brand that they built, the NXT with the takeovers that was built around good wrestling. That NXT's dead. And you almost like it almost feels bad as like an AEW fan to see what's happened to NXT, because those takeovers were some of the best wrestling shows of that time. Like from 2017 to up until they lost the war, takeovers were an event that like everybody looked forward to. Like all wrestling fans universally loved them. And NXT was like what people wished WWE was like. But then AEW comes around and we get the war between AEW and NXT on Wednesday nights. And that really hurt NXT a lot because both shows had good wrestling. You could even argue that NXT had technically the better wrestling. But AEW was a major league show where they would bring in big stars and have big surprises and have big storylines. Whereas WWE, if they had something big, it was taking place on Raw or SmackDown, not on NXT. So in many ways, it kind of wasn't a fair fight. And also AEW was, fans got behind it so quickly that NXT began to be compared to it all the time because they were on the same night. And I think that hurt its reputation really bad. And then in the eyes of WWE, since NXT lost the war, there was no value in it, they decided. They decided this was a losing brand, a brand that had lost the war. And so it needs to be totally redone. And now it's NXT 2.0, which is WWE minor leagues. It's the minor leagues of the main roster. And while it was always a developmental show, it had its own style. It had its own approach to professional wrestling. But now NXT has the WWE main roster approach to professional wrestling. And Johnny Gargano and Kyle O'Reilly just don't fit that mold. Although I do think WWE wanted Johnny Gargano to stay. Johnny Gargano and Kyle O'Reilly are smaller guys who don't fit with what the WWE is looking for. So Johnny Gargano teased that he could show up in another wrestling promotion recently. He did a Twitch stream, and he talked about how he loves it when fans chant Johnny Wrestling. He said, the Johnny Wrestling chants, they mean the world to me. If you chant Johnny Wrestling somewhere loud enough, you never know what could happen. I could show up anywhere at this point. That's real. I'm free to do whatever I want. So if someone wants to see me bad enough that Johnny Wrestling chants come in, I'll hear them. I watch everything. You never know. So Johnny Gargano is now positioning himself as like a Beetlejuice or Candyman type character. Like if you say his name, if you believe in Johnny Wrestling enough, he will show up. He will show up on the wrestling program that you want him to. So, Johnny Gargano seems like a very easy choice for AEW to make. Like, you would not have to pay him Kevin Owens money. Johnny Gargano was only making NXT money. So they can afford Johnny Gargano more than they can afford a Kevin Owens. Johnny Gargano is an incredible wrestler who could have fantastic... Could you imagine a Johnny Gargano versus Kenny Omega match? Can you imagine how good that would be? And then the other guy, Kyle O'Reilly, I thought there might have been a hint about Kyle O'Reilly coming in, possibly as early as next week. I thought the hint was when Adam Cole told the Young Bucks that next week on Dynamite, he's going to have like this really special present for them. And I thought, like, that could be Kyle O'Reilly. Because Bobby Fish is now hanging out with the Elite. He's now sort of in with them. I mean, there's all this dissension that's kind of teased. Like, everyone gets along well enough, but not 100%. And we sort of have these hints dropped that there could be infighting amongst this group. This great group doesn't always see eye to eye. Some people maybe aren't sure about Bobby Fish being a member. Kenny Omega, if you remember before he left, he didn't seem like he was too sure about Adam Cole. So we've got all this sort of elite drama that is in the peripheral, that is just sort of, it hovers over everything, but it's not like a main story just yet, but it feels like it will be. So if Kyle O'Reilly comes in, then you've got O'Reilly and Bobby Fish, the Red Dragon tag team, who had a long rivalry in multiple promotions with the Young Bucks. Adam Cole, long history with Fish and O'Reilly as the Undisputed Era. Adam Cole also has the history with the Young Bucks as the Super Click. So, yeah, it was something in the interview this week where Adam Cole made mention about the Super Click, and the Young Bucks said something about like the Super Click and Bobby Fish, as if to say, well, Bobby Fish isn't officially in our group, you know? So just that little thing to say, it's, you know, he's not totally one of us. And we're going to get more and more of that stuff going on as we get closer to Kenny Omega coming back, and if we get Kyle O'Reilly coming in as well. So I thought that was interesting, and I'm wondering if Kyle O'Reilly is that present that Adam Cole promised the Young Bucks. I guess we'll just have to wait and see. All right, so let's talk about Winter is Coming, the second annual Winter is Coming event held in Texas, which I thought was good because if you remember last year, Texas had a lot of problems with snowstorms that they weren't prepared for. So it's good to give them like a little bit of a heads up that winter is in fact coming again this year. And it'll give Ted Cruz some time to get out to Mexico or wherever he wants to flee to this year. So it starts off, and we get the world title match right off the bat. First thing, first match, first segment, Bryan Danielson versus Hangman Page. And I think a lot of people sort of knew going into this that this could be a very long match because they only announced 4 matches on the show. So it seemed like AEW was prepared for these guys to go a long time. And then so it's like, okay, well, we're going to just start it off with these two guys. And it was a 60-minute time limit draw that seemed to go by in a flash. Like it was a quick 60 minutes. So this match was basically split up into a few parts, which I think is just going to happen when you have a match that goes 60 minutes. So the first part of the match was basically a lot of technical grappling, but also a lot of Bryan Danielson sort of like tying himself up in the ropes, asking the ref to break them up, things like that. That goes on for a while. The match does speed up a little bit, but there's a lot of Bryan doing that and a lot of them sort of going back and forth with technical grappling. Then as we get to the first picture-in-picture commercial break, as so often happens, the bad guy gets control of the match, goes on offense, and so Bryan spends the picture-in-picture break working down Hangman Page, a lot of stretch holds, things like that. Then, as so also often happens, when we get back from commercial break, the babyface makes a fiery comeback and Hangman Page is hitting some of his bigger moves. And then we move more into what you would see at the end of a lot of matches where the wrestlers are hitting their bigger moves, they're getting near falls, And both Page and Danielson went for Danielson went for the label lock, and Page got out of it. Page went for the buckshot lariat. Danielson was able to avoid that. So we get that, and it seems like the end of the match is coming soon. And this is about like 30, 35 minutes in, something like that. But then it's almost like we moved into this next stage of the match where both guys are really injured. And so what happens is Danielson rams Page's head and shoulder into the steel post. And so Page now has a badly injured shoulder, and he's busted open. So that allows Danielson to go on offense for a bit. But as Danielson's going on offense, he goes to kick Page while he's on the ring apron, misses, and rams his own leg up against the steel post. So now Danielson has an injured knee. And we knew that his knee was injured going into that match already. They brought this up on commentary that Danielson had a taped up knee. So now we've got this new stage where they're both injured. They're both like, how can they both go on? Then as we get closer to the end of the match, like with 10 minutes left, we hear the timekeeper, or I guess it was Justin Roberts that announced it, that there's 10 minutes remaining in the match. And that sort of sets a light bulb off in everyone's heads where, okay, one of two things is possible at this point. Either we're going to a time limit draw, or somebody wins this with like 3 seconds left. And really, either could have happened at this point. And so there was a lot of stuff at the end where each guy is trying to finish the match. Danielson has Page locked up in the label lock, and I think that was with like a minute left. And I remember thinking, the match could run out with Page in the label lock. That would be kind of an interesting story. If at the end of this match, Danielson had Page in the label lock for over a minute, Page wouldn't tap, he didn't pass out, and just endured the pain until we got a time limit draw. But that's not what happened. Page gets out of the hold and then hits like a massive buckshot lariat on Danielson. But before he has a chance to pin him, the bell rings, we have a time limit draw. And it really did feel like a quick 60 minutes. Like, it was a 60 minutes where you're engaged in the entire match. There's a story to the entire match. There's a story there's different stories happening at different parts in the match. So there's never any point where you're like, oh, an hour long match. Come on. But now we have the question of, we've got to see a rematch between these two, right? And that's what they were saying on commentaries. Oh, what a great rematch we're going to be in store for. So how do you do that rematch exactly? Because you have to come in with a stipulation that there's no time limit. So that makes it very hard to do on television. So one option is you could do the rematch between Danielson and Hangman Page at Revolution, which is in February. So you'd be holding it off for like 2 months. The other option is you could do it at Battle for the Belt on January 8th, which is that Saturday special event that they're going to do. But that special is only supposed to be for like an hour. So could you do a no time limit match on that show? I mean, you could say, all right, well, we've scheduled this show for an hour. It's going to go an hour, but we'll just stick with the match for as long as it goes. And then maybe the match wouldn't go a full hour or something like that. But it seems like they need a particularly big match or a few big matches to make that event on the 8th special. Because it's 1 hour, it's happening on a Saturday night, so it's outside the usual viewing pattern for AEW fans. And so there has to be some big draw that makes people think, oh, I can't miss this. I can't miss this match. And so maybe that's Bryan Danielson versus Hangman Page, the rematch, with there being a stipulation of no time limit. Or maybe there would be some other gimmick on top of it. Like Bryan Danielson was wasting so much time by tying himself up in the ropes early in the match. Maybe they decide, oh, we got to put these guys in a steel cage. Maybe that's something that they decide to do. So, I mean, there's a lot of different possibilities, but I think we're looking at either Battle for the Belts or Revolution when we see Hangman Page versus Bryan Danielson next. And then it'll be very interesting to see who comes away that match the winner. And I think what we will probably see is that the winner of Page versus Danielson will face the winner of an eventual CM Punk versus Maxwell Jacob Friedman match. Because both MJF and CM Punk have now talked about wanting the winner of that match. So maybe at Battle for the Belts, you've got both CM Punk versus MJF and Danielson versus Hangman Page. Like those two matches, the rematch between Page and Danielson and the first match between Punk and MJF have to happen at around the same time. I guess you could just put Punk and MJF on a regular Dynamite show. You could put them both on Revolution. You could put them both on Battle for the Belts, except for one of the matches isn't for the belt. But that's sort of the world title picture in AEW right now, is those four guys. After that 60-minute world title match, I almost felt like we needed a break, like some type of intermission. Like I wasn't ready to move on to the rest of the card yet, but, well, we had to because that's how television works. So we got a backstage segment featuring the Super Click and Bobby Fish. And as was pointed out, Bobby Fish is not a member of the Super Click, so that's interesting. And that's where Cole teased that he has a Christmas present to give the Young Bucks next week. So that's interesting. I mean, whatever that is, it's important enough that they're giving a week build for it. Like a 1 week build for it, not week as in it's not good. Like a 1 week build for what this present is that Adam Cole's going to give the Young Bucks. Also during this promo, it was suggested by Matt Jackson that they super kick Sue in the face as they continue their feud with the Best Friends. And Sue, of course, is Trent's mom, who drops him off at wrestling in her minivan, in what I believe is one of the greatest entrances in the history of professional wrestling. From there, we moved on to Wardlow going up against Matt Sydal. And man, they are definitely building Wardlow up as a big, big deal. So this was just basically, I mean, not a straight squash match, but pretty much a squash match. And so at the end of the match, Wardlow is giving Sydal a symphony of power bombs, just power bombing him over and over again. And I love that name, a symphony of power bombs. Sounds so classy. So elegant for a move that is to hurt a person very badly. So then Spears gets on the microphone. Spears had some inconsistent behavior here. So Spears gets on the microphone. He's like, whoa, hey, whoa, hey, guy. He's already done. Just pin him. Just pin him, big guy. What are you doing? And so Wardlow gives him one more power bomb and then pins him. And then Spears gets in the ring. He sort of praises Wardlow a little bit. And then even though Spears had been saying, hey, that guy's had enough, just pin him, then Spears takes a chair and just starts beating up Sydal more. So it was not made very clear if Spears cared about Sydal's well-being at all. Maybe the idea was he wanted Wardlow to stop powerbombing Sydal so there would be something left for Spears to attack him after the match. It seems like there is some dissension building between Wardlow and the rest of the Pinnacle, because Spears says, pretends to be on the phone with Maxwell Jacob Friedman and says that MJF needs Wardlow to pick up some champagne for their celebration after the event. So the idea is like, oh, well, Wardlow's being treated like a lackey. He's like the Virgil of the Pinnacle, being told to just go out and get them stuff. So, could be easy for the audience to develop sympathy for Wardlow, even maybe want to see Wardlow beat up the other members of the Pinnacle like Spears, like MJF. So we'll just have to see where that goes. But Wardlow comes off like a big monster, beating up Matt Sydal, and then maybe, Wardlow's got some ideas about no longer being in the Pinnacle. Doesn't seem like they're treating him very well. From there, we got a very creepy vignette with Malachi Black. Now, Malachi Black has sort of teased a little on social media about creating a House of Black. So this would be a stable of dark, brooding characters, similar to him, I would suppose. And we saw in this vignette, there's some person, we don't know who it is, wearing a robe. Malachi Black is doing some ceremony with this person. He spits the black mist into the person's face and sort of is like welcoming them. So I guess I'm taking from this that this person is the first member of the House of Black. But we don't know who the person is. There's some people who think that like a new person coming into the company, and I don't want to give anything away, but there's some rumors about certain people having signed. There's so many rumors about people coming in. Like, it's endless. Anyone from Ring of Honor, any of the 80 people that have been cut by WWE and not already signed somewhere else or in AEW could possibly be this person. But some people have their ideas of who this could possibly be. Other people think like maybe Julia Hart is going to have some sort of reaction to having the mist blown in her face. Like maybe she's going to turn evil from having that done to her. And she wasn't on AEW Dynamite this week. We got a promo from the Varsity Blondes kind of vowing revenge against Malachi Black, or Griff Garrison at least was, but no Julia Hart. So that could be a possibility. Who knows? We'll see where that goes, but we have Griff Garrison versus Malachi Black next week. And maybe we'll find out more about who this mysterious new member of the House of Black is. The next match we had was the rubber match between Hikaru Shida and Serena Deeb. And when this match started, I remember thinking, I've already seen so much wrestling on this. I'm still exhausted from Hangman Page versus Bryan Danielson. Now, the Wardlow versus Matt Sydal match, that was sort of like a quick or not very long squash match. So it's not really anything that you have to get too invested in. With Deeb and Shida, whose name when they're together, I guess, would be Sheeb. So this match, the first two matches were so good. And basically any match Serena Deeb has is very, very good. Hikaru Shida is very, very good as well. But Serena Deeb, if you were to talk about who are some of the best wrestlers in AEW, you have to mention Serena Deeb up there. She is incredible. Remember she had that match with Riho that was incredible. She's had the two matches with Hikaru Shida before this that were incredible. And this was really good too. There was a bit of a different story in this match as opposed to the other two. In the first two matches, Deeb basically only attacked the knee. She was a little bit more diverse in her strategy in this match, but she incorporated a lot of neck breakers into this match, including one spot where she took off the sort of covering of the metal that attaches the turnbuckle to the ring post, and then she wrapped Hikaru, or sort of shoved Hikaru Shida through the middle of that, and then gave her a neck breaker over top of that. And I thought that was very, very cool. That was a very unique move that Serena Deeb did. She also did the figure four across the steel post, the old Bret Hart move, except for Deeb does it on the side of the ring that has the steel steps. So she sort of lays across the steel steps and gives the figure four to her opponent. She also did a really nice Muda lock during this match. Serena Deeb, really, really good, is the main bullet point of what I want to express here. Serena Deeb, good wrestler. And she has actually done some interviews that have shed some light on maybe why she's such a good wrestler. And she talked about how, if you remember, she had been out of, after getting fired from WWE when she was in the Straight Edge Society. For those that don't know, her departure from WWE in 2010, 2011, around there, is ridiculous. She was in the Straight Edge Society, but then some photos came out of her having a drink in a bar or something. They were like, oh, well, you're not living up to your gimmick. You're supposed to be straight edge. And so we're going to fire you over that. So she was actually fired over not portraying her gimmick in real life, which is like from the 70s and 80s, that kind of mentality. That doesn't exist now, and I would argue didn't exist then either. But some old school people definitely decided that Serena Deeb should get fired for that offense to the business, I guess. So she was gone from wrestling for a long time. She became like a yoga teacher. And then around the first Mae Young Classic, she was invited back. She does a match there. And then WWE offers her a job as a trainer. And so she would say in interviews later that it was training, like being a trainer, that helped her really become a better wrestler, because she would break down like the story of a match, why you do certain things at a certain time. She was studying more wrestling, and all of that stuff ended up making her a better wrestler. So that when she comes into AEW, she got laid off, as I believe she was one of the right at the beginning of the pandemic, WWE released her. And so she comes into AEW and the NWA and goes back into wrestling herself. And all of a sudden, she's incredible. And she is the professor of professional wrestling, because literally she's taught it to many of the women who are now like on top in WWE. They were trained by Serena Deeb, or well, I don't know like how many, but she trained a lot of people. So that helps explain why Serena Deeb is as good as she is. But then the finish of this match was Deeb had exposed the top turnbuckle. She was going to do something dastardly to Hikaru Shida, but then Shida was getting out of a pin attempt, kicked Deeb into the exposed turnbuckle, then wrapped her up in kind of a cool pinning combination and got the pin. So Shida wins 2 in a row over Deeb, and the trio of matches, the trilogy of matches, the Sheeb trilogy concludes with Hikaru Shida coming out the victor. So we'll see what's next for Shida. Hopefully, I don't see this loss affecting Deeb too much. I mean, Hikaru Shida is one of the top women in the division, but hopefully both of them get to do some cool stuff after this. Before we got to the main event of the show, which was MJF taking on Dante Martin for the Dynamite Diamonds ring, which MJF has won 2 years in a row. Well, now 3. So we got Griff Garrison's promo. Well, the Varsity Blondes were there talking about what Malachi Black did to Julia Hart. And Griff Garrison then challenges Malachi Black to a match next week. Also, they reviewed Hook's debut from Rampage. And boy, did I enjoy Hook's debut on Rampage, as many, many people did. His sort of judo and submission style, so reminiscent of his dad. And he even used the Tazmission, which he is now calling Red Rum, as his finish. He basically did everything except for walk out with a towel over his head. But there is something about this Hook guy that is really resonating with a lot of fans. He got a lot of buzz even before he stepped into the ring, just by being a guy hanging around Team Taz eating potato chips. He had garnered like a fan base of people who really supported him. And so now I wonder what happens with Hook. Like, now Hook's had his debut. How often do we see Hook? Do we see him on Dark? Do we see him on Dark Elevation? I don't know. I don't know what the future holds for Hook, but I'm looking forward in following his career. I'm looking forward to following his career. Then Eddie Kingston cut a promo challenging Daniel Garcia in 2.0 to find 2 teammates to take on him, Santana and Ortiz and the Lucha Bros for next week. And that is coming off of that brawl they had backstage last week. Then we get MJF coming out, and boy, what a difference a week makes. What a difference being out of Long Island makes in terms of the reaction to MJF. He's booed out of the building. Everything is right again. MJF is getting booed by the crowd. And MJF, he insulted Texas. He called them rednecks and something about incest and, his general thing. And he talked about CM Punk saying that he wants nixed between who wins between Danielson and Page, I guess, when they have a rematch. And MJF sort of downplayed CM Punk's claim to a title shot. He said, you've had a bunch of underwhelming matches against underwhelming opponents. I don't know if that qualifies you for a title shot. I think it just makes you the next Ryback. And Ryback actually posted something on Twitter about it. I don't think we need to repeat what Ryback said. It was nothing noteworthy. But Ryback, he heard this. So MJF also said that he deserves a title shot after he's beaten Dante Martin. So that all leads me to believe that CM Punk and MJF are going to wrestle. The winner of that match will go on to challenge whoever is the world champion between Bryan Danielson and Hangman Page come that time. So this match, I thought it was interesting. No Leo Rush. Leo Rush didn't come out with Dante Martin. So we're assuming that Leo Rush and Dante Martin had this plan to swerve Team Taz, but there was no Leo Rush this week. So I guess we'll have to wait a little bit longer to find out exactly if Leo Rush and Dante Martin are back together or what's going on with them. But Dante Martin could have used Leo Rush's help in this match. And Dante Martin, oh my God, he reminds me of Rob Van Dam. Like Rob Van Dam, like early WWE Rob Van Dam, so post ECW Rob Van Dam. Rob Van Dam would come in, they would never give him like any, like at first anyway, they didn't give him storylines, or he was in the Alliance, but everybody cheered him. And basically, he just had matches, but he would do all this amazing stuff, so the crowd got really behind him. And that's what Dante Martin kind of like reminds me of right now. He just comes in, he never says anything. He's in a storyline, but he's not really the one doing things in the storyline. Everybody else is saying things and doing things. He just comes in and is an amazing wrestler. And that's what he did. I mean, some of the moves that he does are so, like, you just, like, he looks like a video game in there. And like some of the things that he does is like, wow, like this guy jumps so high, does so many crazy things. And that's basically what this match was him doing a bunch of really cool looking stuff. And then MJF doing like a basic, simple move set, but being this dastardly heel that everybody hates. And so the end of the match comes where it looks like Dante Martin has MJF pinned. But then out of nowhere, you never saw him coming, Ricky Starks, who Dante Martin had tossed out of the Battle Royal last week and turned on Team Taz, Ricky Starks puts MJF's foot on the ropes. Dante Martin's like, hey guy, why did you put his foot on the ropes? That's not fair. And MJF gives him the salt of the earth armbar. Dante Martin taps out. And for the third year in a row, he wins the Dynamite Diamond Battle, or Dynamite Diamond Ring. Then after the match, I feel like they were maybe a little low on time here because a lot of stuff happened in a short amount of time. So FTR comes out. Of course, FTR's in the Pinnacle with MJF. So they're out there. Then the lights go out. And when the lights come back on, Sting and Darby Allin are in the ring. They start brawling with FTR, but then MJF kind of joins the melee, and the Pinnacle has the 3-on-2 advantage against Sting and Darby Allin. But just as Sting and Darby Allin are getting beaten up, CM Punk's music plays, and he comes out with a bat. He chases off the rest of the Pinnacle, and then it's announced for next week in the Greensboro Coliseum, it will be Sting, Darby Allin, and CM Punk going up against MJF and FTR. And of course, it's Sting in the Greensboro Coliseum. And so a lot, obviously he has a lot of history there from another era. But so that will be the big match in the Greensboro Coliseum next week. And we've got some matches scheduled for Rampage as well as next week's show. Let's run those down. All right, so for Rampage on Friday night, we got 3 matches announced. One is the Young Bucks, Adam Cole and Bobby Fish going up against Orange Cassidy, Rocky Romero, Chuck Taylor, and Trent. We've got the Lucha Bros teaming with Santana and Ortiz and Eddie Kingston going up against 2.0 Daniel Garcia, and it was announced that the Acclaimed will be joining the bad guys in that match. Then Ty Conti and Penelope Ford are going to have a submission match. We saw a little video package about their rivalry during the show. Also announced for Rampage is the return of American Top Team's Dan Lambert, who we haven't seen since the Inner Circle beat American Top Team at Full Gear. Then we've also got a few matches announced for next week's Dynamite. We have, as was announced in the main event, it'll be Sting, CM Punk, and Darby Allin going up against MJF and FTR. Also announced for next week is Griff Garrison taking on Malachi Black. And I imagine we will have more matches announced for next week's Dynamite on Rampage this week. And so that's going to do us for this week again, everyone. Thanks so much for supporting this video. Please, if you haven't already, hit the subscribe button, hit the like button, and share this video with anybody who you think might enjoy it. I'm Gentleman Ian for Spoiler Free Wrestling.